Hello, beautiful people, and welcome into the Story of Podcast. I'll give you guys a minute to get settled in, repost the podcast on our Facebook page. Would be much appreciated. This week, we are going to get the story of Ryan Schmelz coming from Cleveland, Ohio. Ryan, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me, guys. It's great to be here.
I am joined, as always, by my guy, partner in crime, Jeff Webb. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm excellent. This podcast is going to be a little different than last week and weeks in the past. Last week was Scott Horvitz. We want to thank Scott for everything he did, coming on and sharing his insightful knowledge in the sports film industry. This week, we are getting a person in front of the camera, but we are going to dive in his past. Ryan works. I used to work with Ryan. He works with Jeff for the Ohio station. And he approached me last month and said, I'd like to come on your podcast. I have some crazy stories that'll blow your mind. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I got the entire August schedule planned out, but come time in September, we could talk about you coming on. And he told me a little bit about his childhood, and I think it needs to be told for everybody. So let me go over our sponsor real quick before we dive into the details with your story. But Chase and Tail Adventures, I'm wearing the shirt, not the hat today. Go check them out on Instagram at chaseandtailadventures.com. Excuse me, www.chaseandtailadventure.com, and then on Instagram at chaseandtailadventure. Ryan, I think we're ready for you just to go. If that's okay.
Oh, how are we going to do this?
So I'm going to ask you. Jeff and I are going to ask you some questions, and you're just going to tell us your story.
Yeah, let's do it.
Tell us who you are, where you're from, how you grew up, and all that good stuff.
Okay, so I grew up in this city called Cockeysville, Maryland. Like Cockeysville Sparks, depends on where you ask and who you ask. So like I kind of refer to my where I grew up kind of like the gateway to the either the gateway to Baltimore or the gateway to the middle of nowhere, depending on what way you go. So like where I live, if you go north of me in northern Maryland, it is like nothing but cornfields and horse farms, all the way up until you get to like York, Pennsylvania, and some of the other smaller Pennsylvania cities, and ultimately like actually no, you got to go left or right to go to Pittsburgh or Philly. But then if you go south of me, it's like nothing but suburban Baltimore until you actually get to Baltimore City. So it's like just a very different world, no matter which door, either if you go north or you go south. So like I kind of say like we were like somewhat country growing up, but not like fully country. So like we went to like somewhat of the suburban high school, but like my whole mom's side of the family is farmers, or it's a farming family. Like my mom grew up on a farm. She was the youngest of 5 kids. Her oldest brother took over my grandfather's farm. And, we always were aware of that kind of life. We weren't like super overly exposed to it. Like, obviously we knew our family was a farming family. We spent a lot of time up there, but we were never like, forced to do farm labor, as kids or anything like that. Then my dad, my grandfather was a World War II veteran, had my dad and my uncle after he got home from the war and married my grandmother. And they grew up in a little somewhat suburban Maryland. My dad said it was a little more rural when he was growing up, but now like where he grew up, it's just straight suburbia. And my dad, I make fun of my dad. I call him a blue collar sellout. Cause like my dad, when he got out of business school, he was like he was a John Deere. He owned a John Deere dealership. So he sold John Deeres for a living. Like that's pretty sick, And then, he eventually moved on to insurance, where he's now like wearing nice pants and nice shoes to work for a living. So I was like, Dad, you sold out so hard. You were so country before. Now you're not.
He did his country work so he could work his way up.
I guess.
Honorable. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, he's kind of a beast. He was an Ivy League student athlete.
Oh, wow.
That's like the coolest thing you can be, I guess, right? I don't know.
Where'd he go?
Smart and athletic. I don't know how I didn't get those genes though, but it's what it is.
Yeah, where'd he go? What school did he go to?
University of Pennsylvania.
There it is. So you'd say your family's very close?
Oh yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
We had our issues growing up like every other family, but like now, like, yeah, I mean, like I would say I'm real close to my parents now, especially my mother. I'm real close to my younger brother now. And well, let's just say, as you're going to hear in this story, like there's a lot of reasons why we got real close. But and then like we have the type of family, we have a country family, like just we don't really have secrets. It's kind of like you do something stupid and you show up at Thanksgiving and somehow that thing is going to get brought back to you. And it's just like, how did you find this out? And it's just like, it's just something you have to accept with a family like ours. It's just like, we don't see each other that often, especially me. Like I've traveled so much. This is the closest I've lived to home since I left for college. And this is 6 hours away.
Yeah.
But, no matter how far away I go, I still feel extremely close with my family. And it's a big family. We got like 50 and we're growing.
Wow.
And all my cousins are starting to have kids now. So that's also super exciting.
That is exciting. I think we should get into the topic then.
All right.
Now you broke it down to me, and Jeff and I are hearing this story for the first time. So you experienced sexual abuse as a kid.
Right.
Do you want to talk about that?
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where we want to start here. So like, I'm not going to disclose who this was or get too much into details what my relationship was with the person who did this, because, I don't want to get into the legal side of this, and I don't want people to become wannabe private investigators and track down who it is. And next thing you know, we got a situation on our hands. But it was a family friend, someone a little older than me, significantly bigger than me. And it really started off really small, and one of the first instances I remember this like it was yesterday. We were sitting in a dark room, like we were watching Monty Python, The Life of Brian. And, I just look over, and next thing you know, this guy is just like, his pants are off and he's touching himself. And it just kept getting like gradually worse and worse. And eventually, like, he's showing me pornography. And eventually he starts, continually to touch himself in front of me. And then eventually just keeps getting worse and worse to the point where it gets to touching of said me. And that gradually got worse and worse and worse. And it was like a situation where I felt like I couldn't say no to this person. And, it was miserable. I would just stick my head bury my head and just pray that it ended quickly most of the time. Mm-hmm. And I guess how it stopped. Or do you have any questions from here?
Well, first off, my question is, how old were you?
I want to say it started either between 4th to 6th grade. This was the duration, I would say, of like end of elementary school into the end of middle school. Okay. So it was like right before I started hitting puberty. So like when that every kid's puberty, it's the weirdest time of their lives. Mm-hmm. And that was just an even weirder time for me because, I had the same urges that every kid has when they're going through that, but it was always so weird for me because I just had my first exposure to I guess what sex was that. And it just was very, as painful as it was also just as awkward and weird. So yeah, what do you have from there?
Jeff, you don't have questions. I got questions.
Go for it.
It's obviously awkward for you, but could you tell anybody? Could you talk to anybody? Or was it just you kept it all inside?
So I did start opening up to a girl I was dating in middle school. Okay. And she was very adamant about, you need to start telling people about this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I remember the day I finally told. So since I'm ADHD, I had a psychiatrist I saw my whole life, because I had to get prescribed medication. And one day I tell him finally, and it just comes out of nowhere. And when I tell him, he like brings my mom into the room, and it kind of like just comes out of nowhere. That where he tells, he's like, he just kind of points, and I'm like, okay, mom, here's what's happening. And I tell mom what's going on. So I remember that while I'm explaining this, my mom gets a phone call. And I guess it was like somebody who had been calling her nonstop, and it was the wrong number every time. And she just like unloads on this person, like, we're in the middle of a family crisis right now. You need to go away and don't call this number ever again. She just hangs up. And I'm like, ooh, feel bad for that guy. And so like, I remember after that, my mom gets on the phone with my pediatrician, and she says like, hey, I need to tell you what's been going on. This would happen to my son. And this is late. Like, this is after school's over. So I'm pretty sure this is after 5 o'clock when this happens. And we go right to the pediatrician's office. So like, big appreciation to this woman. I believe she was a family friend. So like, she was willing to meet us even after hours. And we go into this office. Nobody's there. It's just me, the doctor, my mom. We go into the office, and she makes me tell her everything that's happened. Like, I had to just get in like the most, it was so uncomfortable. Like, I had to explain every little thing that had happened to me with this guy. And then like, I guess like the way in which it happens, she has to determine like, well, then she says like, well, based off what you told me, you have to take an AIDS test. Of course I was scared crapless when I heard that. And of course I got it done, and it was fine, negative, but that was, I guess that's when it really just escalated. And I remember coming home, and we had a corgi, little dog, and mom tells my dad in private, and he says, hey, well, let's take the dog for a walk. And my dad starts asking questions while we're on the walk. And I remember my dad was like, I'm going to kill him. Like, I'm going to kill this guy. I cannot believe he did this to you. And I'm like, yeah, just please, I don't want it to go this way. Like, let's just try to get over this as quick as possible. And I guess that was it. Just like, when it stopped, I was starting high school, and I was, just the world was weird from there on out. I mean, what questions do you have from there?
I want to know, after you went through this, after you aged, you've had time to reflect on it. What do you think other people who might be going through something similar need to hear?
Well, first of all, you got, don't be afraid to tell somebody. Obviously, that's how you get out of the situation in the first place. Mm-hmm. I would say there's a lot of resources out there. There's therapy sources, all that. I mean, you shouldn't be afraid to go see a therapist. That's just, I'm very happy the way this country's going right now. We've really, really been trying to normalize depression, mental health, PTSD, all those things. So like, it's no longer like weird to be on an antidepressant. It's no longer weird to go see a therapist, when those things were probably like, oh, that person's effed up in the head if you do that, used to do that. So like, don't be afraid to get help. And don't be afraid to tell anybody. Like, the resources are there. You just gotta do it. And the reality is, like, it's going to be weird probably your entire life. That's just, you got to learn to live with it, as I have.
Now, did you, going through this process when you were younger, what did you think? I mean, obviously you were so young. I mean, 4th to 6th grade, life is changing crazy for everybody at that age. But did you think like something's really not normal in this situation? Do you put the blame on you? Because I know some situations people will put the blame on themselves.
No, I don't put the blame on myself. I think at times, I probably let it go on too long. I should have told somebody sooner. I probably should have learned to stick up for myself. Honestly, though, like when I got to high school, I got really into weight training. And this is one of the reasons why. I didn't want to be a target anymore. I was a really skinny kid. And I don't think I was short, but like, I wasn't like the tallest kid, and I think like, when I started working out, I was like, well, at least I won't be the most vulnerable looking person anymore. I'm definitely not an intimidating person by any means, but like, I'm definitely not. And there was just, sorry, repeat your question again. How did you say it?
Well, I was asking, did you think this was the normal, and then did you put the blame on yourself?
Oh, no. I always knew it wasn't right. Like, I always knew something was screwed up with what was going on. Like, I don't think I was that naive or that unaware. No.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll piggyback off you with the weight training. Did you wrestle in high school at all, or just lifted weights?
I was on the football. I played football,
Okay.
and I ran track. But like, I thought about joining. I actually did martial arts,
Okay.
but then I thought about doing wrestling. But then, since we were a high school, and our football team was very small. We were undersized every game. So like, just about everybody was playing a position up from what they should have been playing for their size. So like, I'm a 5'11", 5'10", maybe if I'm lucky, 6 foot if I'm standing on my tiptoes, like kid playing tight end, which is, I'm a very undersized tight end and I'm very undersized linebacker. So like, I had to gain as much weight as possible in the off season. So like, and then I went to wrestling tryouts. Like, well, we need you to wrestle down to 152. I'm like, well, I need to be 180 pounds by next fall. So I can't do that. That's just not going to work out for me. And that just doesn't sound fun either. I don't like losing weight intentionally. That sounds miserable. Gaining weight, fun. You could just get to eat all the time.
Yes. Now, were you in 4th to 6th grade? Were you like one of the smallest kids in the class?
No. Okay. So I repeated a grade. That's well, I could have made this whole thing about my ADHD, but yeah. So I repeated a grade. So I was never like the smallest kid because of that. But like, yeah, if I would have stayed in the grade I would have been the ultimate shrimp, probably.
Okay. My 7th grade year, I got bullied to the point where I took the kid to court, and I was one of the smallest kids in my class, but I was telling my friends at the time, like, I don't want to get picked on. So the same thing as you, I understand like the weight training. I got to high school, started doing wrestling, and then from there on, I just started gaining weight like crazy. So I completely understand where you're coming from. Like, you just don't want to
been able to know that, Bobby. That's crazy. I'm sorry to hear that, man.
No, man, everything's a learning experience, and you move on from it. Before we wrap the things on the sex, I mean, is there anything else you want to talk about that story?
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing with this thing too, is like, just as much as like hard to think about it, like, it's very awkward too. Like, I can't just bring this up in normal conversation.
No.
That's what sucks about it. I remember I had slowly started to tell more and more people about this when I was getting older. And I remember telling a girl one time about it, and her reaction was, well, I didn't know boys could get raped. And I was like, whoa, okay. And I know nothing against this person. Like, this person was definitely a great person and very helpful, but it was just like, it just kind of shows like, people aren't really aware of this subject.
Mm-hmm.
And both fortunately and unfortunately, like, this is getting brought to national light because of some national scandals that have happened. Don't need to name them, but I think people are like, more aware of this now and what people go through. But I think for boys, it's just so like weird to talk about for a lot of us. And that was always the problem for me. That the tone in the room is going to change if you ever bring it up.
Yes.
And you don't want to spoil a good mood or a good time by being like, oh, by the way, this happened to me when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And that's what sucks,
Yeah. When people ask me like, hey, you're having Ryan on, he's talking about something that's deep. Like, how'd you get this brought up? And I was like, I worked with this guy one-on-one when you would come down and anchor during Thanksgiving. And I'm like, we just bullshitted about football.
Yeah.
And stuff going on in that realm or Thanksgiving. I'm like, we never got into detail about anything. But then obviously, like you just said, how are you going to bring this up and it be normal? Because this isn't a normal conversation. This will make you feel awkward. This will make everyone else feel, but like, it's a discussion that needs to happen, obviously.
Yeah. And I think the reason I wanted to come on this show is just because, like, I've slowly started to tell more and more people about this. And I've written articles where I've mentioned it before. Like, I did this in college. But like, I didn't get details on the story, what happened. And, I told, I don't know. I saw your podcast and I was like, I've been waiting for an opportunity to do this. And I thought, well, your show's very laid back. You guys are very easy dudes to talk to. And I knew you guys wouldn't like try to force any angle on this. And so I thought, okay, well, this would be the perfect, and it's such a laid back environment. Like, you know, when we were talking before we even started recording, you know, it was just such a good environment to be around. And, you know, that I thought this would be the perfect way to do this.
I think it's, sorry.
Go ahead, bud.
Oh, I think it's really powerful that you come on to talk about this, to normalize talking about this. You said, you know, sexual abuse for men, for boys, is an incredibly under-discussed topic. It needs to be something that is brought to light for, you know, so we can minimize abuse in any community. And I really think it's really important for people who need to hear it. So thanks for telling your story.
You know, and I think, you know, one person I really appreciate the work she's done on a national scale. Oprah Winfrey has brought. I remember watching. You know, my mom was a big Oprah fan, and I'll admit I liked her show a lot. But she would bring a lot of men who were sexually abused onto her show. She brought on a man who was sexually abused by a woman. And that's a very rare, I think it's a very rare circumstance for that to happen, where it's a woman abusing a male like that. But, you know, it was, you know, I've seen it from like NFL players, and when they're able to share their stuff, it makes it easier for you to share. And I think that, like, I wish there were more resources out there, like support groups, like something similar like an AA, where you just have people who've been through the same thing, like sitting in a circle, sharing their problems and just, you know, being there for one another. Because I would love to be able to do that, but like I really haven't been able to find anything out there that like is specific to this.
Yeah, well, that's what this whole that's what Jeff and I, when we first created this podcast, like, let's just give someone a platform to tell their story, and we ask about it, and that's it. That's literally it. But I do want to move on, if we can, to the next part of the story, because obviously this is a huge part of your life. The first part we just went over, but then there's another situation. You got to tell us about the Browning family. For everyone out there that's not from Baltimore County, Baltimore area, what happened with this story?
So this was a national news story. I mean, it made headlines everywhere. New York Times, CBS News has a national article. It's very easy to Google. So pretty much, I became friends with Nicholas Browning when I was in kindergarten, and he was my first friend at that age. His mom and my mom immediately hit it off. Like, I think they met the exact same minute we met. Like, they were talking in the back during orientation while him and I are playing in the front. And then our families just hit it off so well. So she had a son that just happened to be like, you know, 1 year older than my brother, one grade level below me. Then they had another son that was just one grade level below my brother. I believe he's one grade below my brother. And then they were significantly younger than my parents. The parents were. And we always joked about that with ours. Like, oh, well, mom and dad, why can't you be young like the Brownings are? But our families just became like best friends so quickly. I mean, like, my mom on the phone with Tammy Browning nonstop. We would go up to Deep Creek Lake with them all the time. Deep Creek Lake is it's a very small lake / ski town, an outdoorsy town in Western Maryland, near the Pennsylvania, West Virginia border. And we just became best friends. Like, I mean, we didn't really keep a lot of secrets from one another. We knew everything about each other's lives. You know, it got to the point where they were starting to replace our family members on the echelon chain of like, here's the first person you notify if something goes wrong. Like, got any questions on them?
No, but the people watching and listening are going to have questions like, where is this going to go? So,
right, obviously, yeah.
I guess you guys were good family friends.
Yeah,
and
correct.
Yeah, I'll ask questions when we get into it.
They were mavericks in our community. I mean, like, they were some of the most loved people. You know what I mean? Like Greg Browning. So it was John Browning was the father. He was a prominent lawyer in the state of Maryland. Tammy was the mom. PTA, heavily involved in the school. Then Greg was the younger brother, and Ben was the youngest brother. And Nick was the oldest. Nick was the oldest. And then you have Greg and you have Ben. So Greg and my younger brother were best friends. Greg was the most loved kid I ever met in my life. Like, I do not know a single person who didn't like Greg Browning. And if they didn't like him, they had some serious issues. He was goofy as can be, but he was also the kind of kid, he would put his hand on your shoulder if you needed something. Like, he was the first person to reach out to you if something went wrong. And Ben was kind of like my other younger brother. He was the younger brother who wasn't a complete pain in my ass, like James was, my actual brother. And then Mrs. Browning was just so easy she was the first person who told anything. Like, one night my brother goes to the hospital. I forget what it was for. And it's the middle of the night. They're the first people I called. I call her middle of the night and I'm like, hey, JP's in the hospital. My parents aren't here. She's like, well, do you want me to come over? I was like, really? Like, it's a school night. It's 2 a.m. It's like, yeah, I'll come over. I'm like, no, you don't need to. But it blew my mind that she was willing to do that. And another thing about how cool these people were, like, so we had a scout trip. We went to West Virginia for a ski trip. And on the way back, this one dad and his 2 kids flipped their car and they have to get rushed to the hospital. When they get discharged, Mrs. Browning, my mom, and one other mother were at the cabin in Deep Creek. And they're like, well, we'll go get them. So they drive to this hospital in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia. They pick this family of strangers up and they take them back to their house. And the kids are playing video games. The dad's drinking wine with all the moms. And these guys have a blast, even though they just had, the traumatic car crash.
So you'd call the Browning family like the all-American family. Everyone loves them.
Everyone loved them. Like, they were awesome. Yeah. And
all right, so you want to take us down the next part?
So in February of 2008, Nicholas Browning, the older brother, is at a friend's house and he's playing. They're hanging out. They're playing video games, watching TV, whatnot. Nick tells his friends, "I'm gonna go steal my dad's car and bring it back here, and we're gonna go joyriding." So he told his brother that he was going to do this earlier in the night. So Greg goes downstairs, unlocks the door, then eventually goes to bed. He goes downstairs. He goes into his basement bedroom, walks upstairs, and he sees his dad sleeping on the couch. So he goes downstairs, gets a handgun from his dad's workroom, walks upstairs, shoots his dad in the head, goes upstairs to where his mom's sleeping, shoots her, and then he goes and he kills his 2 younger brothers too. So he murders his whole family in one night. And from some of the reports I've seen that he threw some jewelry onto the ground to make it look like a robbery, goes outside, throws the handgun into the bushes, into the woods, so that they can't, I don't know, what is his logic here is very just interesting. He doesn't steal a car. He goes back to his friend's house that night and just plays video games and hangs out all the next day. Like, they're just hanging out. So he gets a ride home the next day, and then I guess he fakes his shock when he finds his dad dead on his couch. So, and what's even screwed up about this is that he brought these kids with him, I believe, and this other dad. So he put these other guys in this situation that was really probably traumatizing for them to go through. And then, police show up, all this. Eventually, late in the night, Nick confesses to the murders. So I'll remember, I can remember exactly what happened when I found out. So I had gone with the girlfriend I was dating at the time. We went to the movies. We saw Juno. That's how detailed I know about this movie, or about this night. And we go to pick my brother up from a party. It's both of my parents in the car. And mom was like, "Hey, was Greg at the party?" And my brother JP goes, "No, there was one of the neighbors was saying that there's 80 cop cars outside the Brownings' house. Nick must have thrown a huge party or something. Like, Nick must have really done it this time." Because Nick was a sophomore in high school. He was getting into partying, all that stuff. And so we get back and we're all just hanging out. And I get a phone call. My friend's like, dude, you hear what's going on? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, yeah, I heard there's like dead bodies, all this stuff. Like, who, the Browning's house? Like, yeah. I'm like, I look at my dad, and my dad's like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, Dad, you might need to make a phone call. And so my dad like just walks over, he hits the answering machine on our phone. And then you hear this guy say like, hey Lee, this is so-and-so, the neighbor. They're pulling bodies out of the Browning's house. And so we start making phone calls. We called one of our lawyers, who I guess he was getting updates on the situation. And he says like, he explains what's happened. And next thing you know, we're all just sitting there. What the hell are we supposed to do now? Like we're crying and all this stuff. Like, and I felt really bad for my brother, because my younger brother had lost, this was his second best friend he'd lost before he was even in high school. His other best friend had died of a brain tumor when he was in fourth grade. So I couldn't help but think what he was going through. But obviously, I was being selfish. I was going through hell too. It was tough on all of us when we heard this. And we're just like, okay, well, I guess we have to go to church tomorrow. I'm like, oh crap, we got to go out in public. So we show up. I remember my mom like dragging another mom into like a private room. And I hear this screech come from this woman's mouth when she finds out what has happened. And keep in mind, we didn't know the details of what had happened just yet. We just knew that 4 people were dead. And
so did you know right now at that point that Nick was still alive?
Yes.
Or you just knew?
We knew Nick was alive. We knew the 4 victims here. We just thought, I don't know. We had all these crazy conspiracy theories of what had happened. Like, who knows? Maybe it was just a robbery. Maybe it was just, I don't know, someone's past coming back to get revenge. I mean, every ridiculous conspiracy theory you could think of, we probably thought of it when this happened. And then I remember my mom, we're in the car ride home from church. My mom gets on the phone and my mom says, holy, you know what? And I just knew. I knew exactly what had happened when she said that. And it was pretty much that, we had found out that Nick had been the one who killed his family. And we were slowly getting more and more details as the day was going on. And we were starting to get phone calls nonstop. We were starting to get visitors come in. And that was when I knew his life was never going to be the same at that point. I mean, it was just like, there was a Super Bowl that night. That's when my attention was on all yesterday. And now I could give 2 craps about what's going to happen next.
So it sounds to me like Nick just kind of flipped a switch, like he just lost it immediately. Did you know, like, did you see any warning signs?
He had issues with his dad like any other kid did, but like not to the point where, and he even says in the confession tape, I believe, if you can find this in plenty of news articles, he says like, well, my parents are tough on me, but like, I mean, I still get away with everything. They're strict, but they're not tyrants and all that. I mean, he had his issues like every other kid, but nothing like this. And
you were friends with him for a while. Did you?
I was friends with all of them. Yeah.
But I'm saying, did you ever suspect, or did you ever get a sense like, wow, this kid is evil?
He wasn't a perfect kid. I can tell you that. I mean, he definitely was.
Perfect,
I mean, there was an editor. I believe somebody wrote an editorial to a paper like saying he was a total bully. I mean, like now that it's all happened, I mean, like there have been signs that like, okay, maybe that could have been a warning sign, but like I've seen way worse, and no one's ever done this. So yeah, like, okay, yeah, that could have been a warning sign, but like, he wasn't any worse than, some other kids. I mean, there was like one Boy Scout trip where like he got a really bad report from a scout council. But like, he wasn't like I don't know. It's kind of hard to say, he had his issues like everybody else did, but like, keep in mind, Nick was one of the smartest people I ever knew. Nick and Greg were 2 of the smartest men I knew. And Nick could competently talk politics in 6th grade. Like it was mind blowing how smart this guy was. He was on track to go to a really good college. He was a student athlete, and he was going to be weeks away from being an Eagles, or like a year away from being an Eagle Scout. So he was like, I mean, he had the resume of like the all-American kid. Like this kid was going to be a future star at something. But you know, I don't know. Like go on. Sorry.
If you want to keep going, keep going. I mean, we're here for you.
Yeah. You want to know what happened after that, I guess?
Yeah, that's exactly where I want to go.
So like, I had to go to school the next day, or Monday, which sucked. I mean, the one saving grace in this whole thing was that, you know, this is my foreshadowing that I was going to go to Ole Miss. Eli Manning, this is the Super Bowl when Eli Manning beat
Tom Brady,
New England Patriots. So that was kind of like like when I remember watching that game and just sitting there and be like, oh, well, not everything about this day is going to be totally terrible. You know, like one good thing had to happen, and this was it. And we go to school. I go to school the next day, and I was a mess, obviously.
Did he go to school? Did all the brothers go to school with you at that point too? Or?
No. I was a freshman in high school. Nick was a sophomore.
At that same high school, though, correct?
Yes, we're at the same high school.
So that
Greg, Ben, and my younger brother went to Cockeysville Middle School.
Okay.
So Greg was a year away from being in high school with me.
Okay.
So imagine what it's like for those middle schoolers. Yeah. You just had
two classmates
get shot, and you're in middle school.
When you walked in, did you feel it in the school? You could feel the tension?
Somewhat. It depended on who you were. I mean, I would get some looks from people like, "Oh, I'm sorry about your friend." It was fairly supportive. I remember sitting down at lunch, and this is actually a funny story. And I sit down, and everyone knows, you know, this Ryan's best friend just got killed. And I sit down, and everyone's just quiet. They're all looking at me, and we all acknowledge each other like, yes, yeah. And this one kid, this really tall, goofy kid, sits down next to us, and he just goes, "Wow, did you guys hear about that kid who killed his family?" And we all just like bury our heads. We look around, and we all just kind of start like laughing. And I was just like, you know what? Well, like they looked at me like they wanted me to give them permission to laugh. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. This is ridiculous. I can't believe you just said that. And I'm just like, oh my God, this guy. And I think when stuff really started to hit the fan was John Browning was our scoutmaster, and I had just became our senior patrol leader, which is like the top kids, team captain, I guess how you put it. And we had to go to scouts that night, or we didn't have to. My dad said, "You don't have to be there." And I'm like, well, I kind of have to be, you know, especially if my younger brother's got the guts to go, I've got to go too. So we get there. Actually, before we get into this, my first TV appearance came right before this.
Oh my goodness.
So the news cameras were lining the property outside of our campus. And I walk right up to one of them, and they just stick their cameras right in my face. And I start talking, and eventually, like, they say to me, like, you know, like, tell us about them. And I'm like, I mean, Mrs. Browning was my second mom. That's the only thing I could think to say. And then they asked about Nick, and they were like, well, what was he like? I was like, well, you know, he had his issues like everyone else, but not to do this. And so like, after that, I tell my mom, I was like, yeah, I got an interview about a news station. Even though I feel like I would have gotten fired for doing that. Cause like technically we're supposed to get like parental consent if we interview somebody under the age of 18. So that was weird. And so I'm telling my mom about it, and I tell her about the things I said. And my mom's just like, well, you know, they're just going to pull the line about you talking about Nick. And this is the first time I realized that maybe the media is not as bad as what people make it out to be. Cause we watched the news story later, and they pulled the soundbite of me talking about Mrs. Browning, which made me feel really good, you know. And at the funeral, like a week later, somebody brings up that's what I said. He was like, some really nice young man called Tammy a second mother. And that made me feel happy that I actually decided to go speak to the news stations, because, one person saw that and they felt better because they heard somebody saying that on TV. So that was, I always say, media can be your weapon. It doesn't have to be your downfall. Like, and I feel like that's it. We weren't very transparent with the press. Our Boy Scout troop cut them off quite a lot. The pastor of their church kind of was like the spokesperson through everything. So he like spoke on behalf of us, but I was like, maybe we could have let them in, maybe we could have shared the story, because it was all negative, what you were seeing. So it was just, that's how it was. And so we go to the scout meeting that night, and what we kind of did was I stood at the entrance to the meeting we were at, and sorry.
You're a busy man.
Oh, my girlfriend's calling me. I don't know why.
She not watching? No love.
I don't know. She might be worried about something. I don't know. But we go to the church that night, and we're sitting at the front entrance, and all the moms start walking in, and all the families start walking in, and I've got to like greet them as they're coming in. That was tough. I mean, like, people are like breaking down as they come up to me, and I'm crying with them. And then we decided to make this circle. And what was cool was, since we had just lost our scoutmaster, we had to have a new one. And this scoutmaster Jim was our guy. He was kind of like the scoutmaster in waiting. And my dad was telling me on the way, and he's like, "Hey, we're gonna have like a transitional team. Like all the scoutmasters will help him and kind of be like the co-scoutmaster until he's ready to take over himself." And I mean, the minute he walked in, he was the scoutmaster. I mean, it was this guy, it truly is a hero. I mean, like, the way he was so nice to all the kids, like just being there for us, but also having like that firm leadership presence, because he cried with us, but like he also showed the strength we needed. And I had to do that too. I don't think I did, but it was like, I mean, there would be scout meetings where I'd just be like chewing the kid. I would be yelling. I'd be so angry. And I think the guys knew why I was that way. And unfortunately, like when this was over, like I would always bring it up, and the guys were like, "Oh yeah, that was funny." It's like, okay, phew, you never thought I was just being like a jerk. You thought it was funny that I was angry. That's good. But we had to like sit around in this circle and just share stories about them. And we like made it clear we wanted to remember how they lived, not how they died. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about them, And it just got rough from there. And then the funeral happened, and I had to see. The hardest thing about the funeral was seeing their cousins, who were young girls. I think the oldest one was maybe in elementary school, and wonder what they're thinking. And Greg had written this poem before he had died, not long before he had died, and she read it to everybody. And it was just like, holy crap. Like, people were lost after that. It was rough. And yeah, and it got crazy from there. I mean, there were things I did during that time I really regret. I remember a kid commented on, like, had said something about me being on TV and said I was full of crap. So I confronted him in the hallway and chewed him, like screamed at him. And I feel bad about doing that. Like, I really regret it. I wish I could apologize to that kid today. Like, it's one of those things I have issues confronting people about things just because of that day. Like, I felt so guilty about doing that. But, I was going through a lot. So I guess I have some excuse. I don't know.
It was grief, man. I mean, that's almost nobody can say they've gone through that. Now I'm unfamiliar with the proceedings afterwards. Nicholas was charged with first-degree murder. Correct?
I believe he's serving like 4 life sentences or something like that. I don't know the specific what he pled guilty.
Mm-hmm.
He wept at his hearing. I never went to court. I never went to one of their hearings, so I can't really like speak too much about what had happened. I know
Did your family members go?
None of us ever got like asked to speak or anything like that I know. I was never asked to. You know, I was never brought in. No lawyer calls. Nothing. And I think they knew that. I think I would assume the defense team knew that we would just shatter this kid. You know, there weren't a lot of people who spoke on his behalf that I can think of. So I mean, you know, then of course, like the question of why kept getting brought up, and his defense team had alleged abuse from the father. The other folks had said he was doing this because he wanted to get his dad's inheritance, and that he had killed his younger brothers because he wanted to have it all for himself. And there were so many mixed stories, and I don't really know which one's true or not, but it's, you know, I'm never going to know what, I mean, unless Nick ever invites me to see him in prison, I'm never going to know why he actually did it. You know, I have my leanings about what I really think happened, but it's all just going to be hearsay. You know, he tells the truth. I don't know if I'm going to believe him.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about reaching out to him, like writing a letter?
I have. Yeah, I have quite a lot.
You have thought of it, or you have?
I have thought of it. Yes. Okay. I've never pulled myself to do it. If he were to reach out to me, I'd take his phone call. Mm-hmm. And that's probably just because of my curiosity of being a journalist. I'd listen to him. Mm-hmm. I want to talk to him. And the crazy thing is, I decided to forgive him years later. That was the hardest decision of my life.
And why is that?
I guess we can kind of get into the religion side of this. So I grew up in a religious family. We went to church. Faith was definitely big, especially on my mom's side of the family. You know, I always believed in God, but like I wasn't a loyalist. And when I would go to these Young Life groups, and eventually there was one speaker, and he kind of dropped this line on me. He was like, or he dropped on everyone. He's like, if your life is so miserable without Jesus, well, can it get any worse if you at least try putting him in your life? And I was kind of like, okay, I'll try it. Let's try it. And eventually I got talked into going to Young Life camp. And I guess they do this thing where like they show you some really deep stuff, and then they give you 20 minutes alone. And I didn't forgive him the first time. But the second time, when I finally, I think, came at peace with my faith and what I had been through, I caved and I decided to forgive him. And I remember when I went and told my therapist that when I finally did it, she was like, good. And she had never told me to forgive him. I kind of decided to do that on my own. And people had told me, like, you have to forgive him one day. And I thought that was the craziest idea. There's no way I can ever forgive this guy. And when I finally decided to forgive him, like, she said, you were never going to be able to move on if you couldn't come to grips with doing that. And I'm happy I did. So that means that I've got to actually live it. So if he were to reach out to me, I'd have to take his call. If he wanted me to come see him, I'd probably have to do it. I'm probably never going to testify in his favor to get him on parole or get him out of jail quicker. But, what happens next to him is between him, God, and the people he killed. It's not about me.
This has been both these stories that you've shared with us tonight have been a part of you in your life since pretty much as far back as you can remember. Obviously, the Browning family was close with you since day one, kindergarten. And obviously, right before you hit puberty, you had the sexual abuse. How have you overcome these situations in life?
Well, faith, as we just touched on, that really made a huge difference. I think that would probably save my life. I got more motivated when I got older. Like I got involved with student government, a lot of those other things. And I have a lot of good people. You know, I think my scoutmaster really was really was a huge help. And made it almost an hour. I finally got there. So we had this family that was like they're kind of like the Brownings were like the middleman between us and this family. And it was a mother, a father, and then two boys. And the one boy's name was Tiffer. His name was Christopher, and he went with the second part of Christopher. So nobody does that. So he was goofiest kid, but he was awesome. And like a day or two after the shooting happened, they came over, and I guess like we all just hit it off immediately. You know, like we never disliked them, but like we never were like, oh, these guys are the coolest. You know, we weren't like friends. I don't think we were. We were cool. Like we would hang out every once in a while. We weren't like tight. And you know, the boys come downstairs with my brother and I, and we get real deep into talking. And I think the older brother was the first person who asked, like, would you ever forgive Nick? And I thought it was crazy. He was bringing this up 2 days after he did this. And I think we hit it off immediately. The younger brother, Tiffer, was the first kid I ever told about my sexual abuse that was a male. And outside of my dad, but that was kind of more of a forced thing. And when I told him about it, I remember crying on his shoulder and him just like coddling me. And that's when you knew you had somebody who was going through this with you. And him and Tiffer and my younger brother spoke at the funeral. They spoke on Greg's behalf. So they became kind of our replacement would be the bad word, but they definitely filled that void. We're like, these are our new friends. And I believe the mother was the first person my mom told when she had breast cancer. So these folks have really been there ever since. You know, we don't see them that often, unfortunately. But it's the kind of thing where like, I could go 5 years without seeing these guys, and they'd probably be the first person I'd call if I ever truly needed something. Mm-hmm. But you know, I've got I aunts, uncles have always been willing to talk about these things, and I've always been able to share these things. I have a mom I'm able to share these things with, and I had a lot of girlfriends, like ex-girlfriends, I would open up to about these things. And you know, these relationships didn't work out, but it's like, you know, I have to be appreciative of these people who were there. Mm-hmm. And that scout troop, man, I mean, those guys, it was a special bond there. Yeah.
You're good. Take your time, man.
That's what friends are for in any capacity, you know, relationship, family, other friends. Like, you listen to one another, and that you never can underestimate the power of just letting somebody share their story.
Yeah. No, it really says a lot. Ugh. And going up our Scoutmaster, you know, so when you graduate college, at least at Ole Miss, they give you like these 2 certificates, and they're like certificates you can give to somebody if they've been there for you. And so like my Scoutmaster got invited to my graduation party, and as he was leaving, I was like, oh crap, I forgot to give him this. So I ran down our hill and I handed it to him. And I explained what it was for. And we both just started breaking down, man. Special moment.
Yeah. Are you still close with him today?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I actually Facebook messaged him before I came on this to ask if it was okay if I used his name. So I was gonna like pretty much make an alias for everybody if I mentioned him by name. And there was another woman. There's a woman who's actually visited Nick several times. She was one of the moms in our scout troop, and her and I bonded. Her name was Miss D, and we bonded a lot over this. And she was kind of like my gateway to what Nick was going through in jail. and she had kind of like access to him because she had written him a letter and he called her. So I don't want to get into what their conversations were like because I think that's between them. But she was also a big piece of, you know, someone to go to during this whole thing. But I mean, like, you know, you really find out who your friends are in these situations. But, you know, I posted about this yesterday and said I was coming on here. I'm getting messages and calls from people I haven't talked to in years. And that's why I loved it. I was like, holy crap, like this meant the world.
Well, you're bringing up something that you probably aren't. Again, this is not a subject you want to open up to because it's going to make the vibe of a room different than what it is normally. After this podcast, though, do you think you're going to reach back out to Nick or try to, or do you just say, we'll just let time go?
I don't know, man, it's really, I think that day will come. I'm thinking about it. I've always thought about it. You know, it's always going to be hard for me to swallow the fact that he killed my boys, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that part, you know, I made the decision to forgive him, but it's still always going to live there, you know, what he did. But I made the decision. I've got to live with it now. I'm not turning back. I do forgive him.
Yeah. I don't have any more questions. I mean, I think
what
we
else
touched
do we have
it.
to talk about here?
We got to talk about your podcast. We got to give your podcast.
Okay. I guess I get some
unless Jeff has something else to say.
Ryan, I just really want to thank you for sharing your story today.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys letting me come on and do this. This was man, this is something else.
I'm hoping you can touch some other people with what you shared today. I think a lot of people need to hear.
And I know there's still kids who are friends with Greg and Ben who probably think about this quite often. So this was actually there was a TV show done about this. I believe it was the Biography channel. You probably found it if you guys Googled this, you might have stumbled upon it. It was like I think it's an episode posted on Vimeo, but it was called like Killer Kids, and I think the Biography channel is the one who hosted this series. But he was in it, featured in it, and they did reenactments. And when I saw that it was being made a TV show, I was really ticked. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna throw my laptop through the room. I left the library at school when I found out about this. I was ticked, but then I watched it. It wasn't that bad. First of all, they chose really good people to interview. So I was happy about that. They did like a lawyer who was familiar with the situation. I believe knew John Browning too. They interviewed the babysitter, and then they interviewed Greg and Ben's lacrosse coach. So I was happy about that. I mean, I thought they had some really good voice, and they gave the people they interviewed the platform to talk about who they were as people, which I really appreciated because that's what they deserve. You know, I thought, and I appreciate that show for like, you know, allowing us to not delve into too much of the backstory of what the accusations Nick was hurling when he was in court and all that. And also just, and I'm not going to lie, we thought the reenactor playing Nick was kind of goofy. You know, they like did this one scene where they showed him like staring at the camera all angry looking, and he had like this like this black hoodie on, and we were just like, oh my God, Nick would never dress like that. But and like, you know, when we talked about it as our group, like our scout troop got together, or some of the guys from the scout troop, we were like, did you guys watch the episode? Yeah. Do you think the actor playing Nick looked goofy? Like, yeah. Like, oh, you gotta find like, and that's another thing. We talk about it, like ways of getting over these things or moving on from these things. You gotta have a sense of humor. Like even the most screwed up stuff that's happened to you, you have to find a way to find some type of way to laugh about it. And that is so much easier said than done. But the minute you can like make things more casual and make them just like a thing of the past or something that you can look back on and still, you know, there's some kind of goofiness in it. That's what you got to do. You just got to do it.
Yeah. I'm gonna back the comedy part up. I mean, if you get to know most comedians, they all have a story that made them that way, and they're all somewhere deep inside. There was a situation. Obviously, not every story is the same. So I wouldn't say it as deep as this, but obviously they have something that makes them tick the way they do. So,
I mean, look what Pete Davidson's been through. I mean, geez, he lost
yes.
his dad in 9/11. You know, it's like, yeah. I mean, these guys are all human too. They've been through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you and I aren't the closest, but I mean, just reading the comments of everyone on here that's friends and family with you.
I haven't seen one yet. What we got here?
Everyone just thanking you and just saying like they're very proud of you for sharing this. And I obviously I'd say the exact same thing. Like for you to come out here and talk about this is huge. And Jeff and I, from the bottom of our heart, thank you, man. And I don't even know what else to say. Just wow.
Yeah, and hopefully this is just the beginning. Hopefully I can share this a lot more because I really want, as I said, I hope just one person, and with everything, we can just help just one person, if one person watches this and feels a little less.
You're good, man.
Just a little less alone. I think we'll be good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're good, man.
What a night. What a night.
What a night. I think Jeff and I knew it was going to be deep going into this. And I mean, it sucks you've had to go through this, but like, thank you for sharing.
No, man, I really appreciate you guys letting me on and being able to give me this platform. It was, I don't know what kind of forced me into doing this. I mean, I guess I like the camera too. Let's not deny that.
You're good at it though. You're freaking good at it, man.
But,
oh my goodness.
I thought this was finally the time, and I'm very happy I did this because all the feedback we're getting is just it really has meant the world.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you allow us on your podcast and we could talk about
pick the movie.
Obviously,
come on, we'll do whatever. Oh man.
I love it. Do you want to talk about your podcast? I mean, unless you have anything else you want to say, because I'm out of questions. I think Jeff's out of questions too.
I think I've gone through all my talking points. I took notes before I did this. I was wondering what the heck am I going to talk about? But yeah. So yeah, my former coworker named Jeffrey Gordon. His name is Jeff Gordon, believe it or not.
Love it.
So we got Ryan Nolan and Jeff Gordon running a podcast together. And it's called Box Out the Quarterbacks, and we review movies. We pick a movie every week and we just talk about it. We go through like our favorite scenes, then we list our top 5 characters. If it's a bad enough movie, we could do at least 5. We haven't really done too many bad movies yet though.
Okay. I got a bad movie for you.
Okay, go ahead.
It's Jeff's favorite movie.
Yeah, have you ever seen a movie called Birdemic?
Birdemic.
Yes.
Straight to DVD?
Yeah, like even worse. Like I don't even know. I just found it online. It is the most horribly produced piece of cinema that you'll ever watch. It is
worse than The Room?
Oh yes, worse than The Room. Yes, and I love The Room. Birdemic is worse acting, much worse cinematography, and horrible editing, horrible special effects. If you love laughing at people fail, it's great.
That's good.
Yeah. People are wondering. It says box office quarterbacking, right? Or box office quarterback?
Box office quarterbacks. Box office QBs sometimes.
Okay.
You gotta get more consistent with that. But yeah, we're gonna start a new rating system for our shows, and we're gonna do since we have like a sports analogy in our name, we're gonna do like if it's a best score will be Hall of Fame, then we'll do All-Star, starter, bench, cut. Like a 1 to 5 scale.
I love it.
Yeah, I was
That's
giving like,
good.
well, yeah, we can add more like minor league and G League and
Are you on like all podcast platforms? They want to know where you could find
yeah,
it at.
like Spotify and all that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm
That's
having
good,
a
man.
blast with it. So
Good, man.
yeah, I'm happy you guys are having a blast with your podcast. Thank you guys for doing this. This has really been in last 48 hours have been just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like nothing I've seen before.
Good.
I'm happy I did this.
We're
Like,
happy you came on.
I
man.
think just the overwhelming support I got from saying this, you know, if you come out and tell people what you've been through, they will support you. There will be one jerk out there who makes a smart aleck comment, but the reality is most people are going to stand with you.
Mhm.
Especially those who know what you've been through will come out of the woodwork. And I hope we can find some way to hopefully reach out to those who've been through it one day.
I like to say, like, during this time in life, I think more people need to come together now more than ever. And we're trying to do this, trying to do that on this podcast.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think Jeff needs to wrap up and say a few things.
I do.
Do it.
So, Ryan, thank you for coming on our podcast. Thanks for sharing your story. Very powerful. People needed to hear it. I do want to add one thing a little extra in the content of Ryan's story today. If any of anybody listening, or if you know somebody who's experiencing sexual abuse, sexual assault, I wanted to put the National Sexual Assault Hotline out there. You can call 1-800-656-4673 to talk to a caring, compassionate person. If you know something's wrong, please reach out. You're not alone.
And do that number one more time.
That is 1-800-656-4673.
Awesome.
We will cut that. I'll cut that and put that on the Instagram page as well.
Sweet.
There we go. And speaking of, this is the Story of Podcast. You can find us on Instagram at storyofpod _. And you can email us with any topics if you want to come on the podcast, if you want to have a discussion about an episode, about a previous episode, about a future episode. You can email us at thestoryofpod@gmail.com. This podcast airs every Thursday at 8 p.m. here on Facebook Live, right here on Bobby's page. We share it to the Story of page. And then every Friday, Saturday-ish, this one will be expedited.
Yes.
We get sent out to every streaming platform where you can find your podcasts: Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Facebook. Yeah, that's it.
I do want to say, though, hold on, Jeff, because we have a lot of people still watching us right now. We're not expecting stories to be as deep as this. Ryan approached us. He wanted to come on. We'd like to have anyone else out there that wants to just share their story. Next week, we have Wesley Russell coming on, who is a professional basketball player overseas and has transitioned now into the everyday person. And he's doing that in the craziest time ever. And we'd like to get his story. Again, last week we had Scott Horvitz on, who is in sports film. So if you have a story and you want to talk to us, let us know. We'd love to have you on. Go ahead, Jeff.
Right.
I'm sorry.
No, yeah. And that's it. Everybody, have a great night. Ryan, thanks again. Bobby,
Thank you guys.
see you guys next week.
Be safe.